There's been a lot of players who have been coming out and talking about these CBA negotiations, telling us what's going on behind the scenes. You know, obviously Nafisa Collier has kind of been leading the charge as far as players being upset with Kathy and upset with leadership in the WNBA. So we have seen mostly from their side. And I feel like if we backtrack, if we rewind to the WNBA finals.
That's Rebecca Lobo, a WNBA legend and a current ESPN analyst, saying out loud what most media members have been too afraid to openly admit. The backlash was immediate. Within hours, she became the target of the week, added to a growing list of people who've been attacked simply for covering the CBA negotiations honestly and without spin. But this is what makes her comments so important. She isn't wrong. The uncomfortable truth is that players are losing public support, and it's happening in real time, right in front of everyone.
There are some things they've said like stop playing games or like putting lipstick on a pig or it's a slap in the face. And it's all of these, I don't know, it's things that you would say if you're in an argument with a friend when you're in high school or college, like not something when you're in a public dispute with your employer on how much you're getting paid. And these are the word choices that you're choosing.
Listen carefully to the language being used in these examples. Slap in the face. Stop playing games. Putting lipstick on a pig. This is not the language of professional contract negotiations. These are phrases you use in emotional arguments with friends, not in billion-dollar business discussions. Rebecca Lobo is simply pointing out the obvious. When you're negotiating a deal that includes million-dollar max salaries and revenue sharing, calling proposals insulting is not strategic. Optics matter. Public perception matters. But instead of adjusting course, the WNBA Players Association chose a different path. They didn't acknowledge the criticism, they doubled down on it.
I'm going to read to you the caption for this. So they said, attendance broke records. Franchises are ballooning in value. The product on the court has never been better. Yet the women driving all this growth, ? They're still waiting for their salaries to catch up. And this is in all capitals. And also, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, the WNBPA also changed their profile photo to one of those sand things. What are they called? You know the sand things that you flip over and it's like a time.
This Instagram post dropped the very same weekend Rebecca Lobo made her comments. And what's most noticeable is what's missing. The post talks about record attendance and claims players are driving unprecedented growth. It specifically highlights Aja Wilson and Alyssa Thomas, two outstanding players who both played on finals teams. But the post references total season attendance and overall viewership records. And we all know who broke most of those records, Caitlin Clark. The Indiana Fever led the league in attendance. Caitlin Clark's games generated the highest viewership numbers by a wide margin. She only played 13 games this season due to injury. Yet even when she was sitting on the bench at road games, she spent nearly an hour before tip-off signing autographs. Fans showed up wearing Clark jerseys whether she played or not. So why is she absent from a post specifically about attendance records and growth? That omission isn't accidental. It's deliberate.
WNBA season has set records for attendance, both in total and per game, even before the playoffs. More than 3 million fans have flocked to see stars like Aja Wilson and the Las Vegas Aces and Alyssa Thomas of the Phoenix Mercury. By many measures, it's been the most successful season in league history, but the players aren't fully sharing in that success. And a lot of people are pointing it out, like, you name somebody like Aja, you name somebody like Alyssa Thomas, but why aren't you mentioning Caitlin Clark? Like, why aren't you mentioning the person who continues to have the highest viewership, the highest attendance, all of these things, even when she was injured? Because again, she played 13 games this past season. She didn't play very much, but when she was injured and she was still going to away games.
Then there's this graph. It shows the NHL, NFL, and NBA with 50-50 its revenue splits between players and owners. Right below that, it shows the WNBA with players receiving just 9% while the league keeps 90%. But that's not how the WNBA's financial structure actually works. The league doesn't fully own itself. The NBA owns a significant portion, and in 2022 outside investors purchased a 16% stake for $75 million. So this graphic isn't technically accurate. Anyone following the business side of the league already knows that. This isn't transparency, it's PR framing. And when you're trying to win public support during a negotiation, accuracy matters. Because once people realize information is misleading, they start questioning everything else being said.
That's not completely accurate, and we have talked about it. And I get that this is like a PR spin for the players, but this graph isn't an accurate representation of the money that comes into this league. Like, the WNBA doesn't own their entire league. It's the WNBA, the NBA, and then that 16% to those outside investors, which we will get to.
Now we reach the most controversial part of the post. Will the gender wage gap in professional basketball finally be closed? That is not a realistic goal. It isn't even a reasonable talking point. NBA max contracts are exponentially higher than anything a WNBA player will earn under this CBA, or likely the next several CBAs. The leagues generate entirely different levels of revenue. NBA players play 82 regular season games plus playoffs. WNBA players play around 40 games plus playoffs. NBA players are bound by exclusivity clauses, while WNBA players are allowed to play overseas during the off-season. These are fundamentally different business models. Framing negotiations around closing the gender wage gap with the NBA sets an impossible benchmark, one that automatically makes any realistic proposal appear insulting by comparison.
That the WNBA is exploring buying back the 16% stake sold for $75 million in 2022, multiple sources told me. And this was an article on Front Office Sports by Annie Costable. She said the deal, valuing the league at roughly $1 billion, was celebrated as a transformative measure. The WNBA has roughly quadrupled in value since then. So again, you guys, if you're not familiar, in 2022, Kathy Engelbert sold 16% of the WNBA to outside investors for $75 million. Now, Annie said here that the WNBA is exploring buying back.
Now there's a fan petition circulating. It's addressed to Kathy Engelbert and Adam Silver. At the time of posting, it had around 3,500 signatures, with a stated goal of 6,400. The WNBA Players Association shared it directly on their Instagram story. The petition includes a pre-written email fans can send to both commissioners. It argues that the league's growth has been driven not by owners or executives, but by the players themselves. It ends with this statement: as fans, we stand with the players. We are prepared to take action. But what action, exactly? Fans aren't sitting at the negotiating table. They don't have leverage. The only real action fans can take is to stop watching, stop buying tickets, and stop purchasing merchandise. And if that's the direction this is heading, it doesn't just hurt the league, it hurts the players too.
That Natasha Cloud did, where she was talking about Unrivaled and the CBA negotiation. So I'm actually going to play this one in its entirety.
My question is, if for some reason that there was a lockout and, the season didn't come back.
I feel like I can't say that there is or there isn't, because I'm not 100% sure, but I know Unrivaled is prepared in so many different instances. And the biggest one being that we own the space that we play in.
Yeah.
So if we wanted to stay here year round as the players of Unrivaled, with equity in this league and with space, financial money, all that stuff, we could stay here, train, play, put on.
Now we need to talk about Natasha Cloud's interview, because this is where the conflict of interest becomes impossible to ignore. She's discussing Unrivaled, the 3-on-3 league co-founded by Brianna Stewart and Nafisa Collier. And yes, this is the same Nafisa Collier who has been one of the most vocal and visible figures in the current CBA negotiations. Listen closely to what Natasha Cloud says. I'm so happy these entities are coming out here, because now the WNBA has to move because there are challenges to you. That statement matters. She's not describing Unrivaled or Project B as complementary leagues. She's not calling them off-season opportunities. She is explicitly calling them competitors to the WNBA, and she's celebrating that fact. Here's why that's significant. For months, fans and media have been told that Unrivaled isn't competing with the WNBA at all, that it's simply an off-season league designed to give players a place to train, stay in shape, and earn additional income during the winter. We've been told that anyone suggesting a conflict of interest, given that Unrivaled's co-founders are also leading voices in CBA negotiations, was being unfair or dismissive of players' rights. But Natasha Cloud just said the quiet part out loud. Unrivaled is leverage. Unrivaled is a competitor, and players negotiating the CBA have ownership stakes in that competitor. That is the textbook definition of a conflict of interest. Now think about this from the WNBA's perspective. You're negotiating a new collective bargaining agreement with a players' union led by individuals who own a competing league. Those individuals have a direct financial incentive for that league to succeed. If the WNBA season is delayed or canceled due to a lockout, where do players go? To Unrivaled. Where does media attention shift? To Unrivaled. Who benefits if the WNBA experiences instability? The people who own Unrivaled. Does this mean the players' demands aren't legitimate? No. Does it mean they don't deserve better compensation? Absolutely not. But it does mean there is a real and serious conflict that influences how these negotiations unfold. And when Natasha Cloud openly celebrates Unrivaled as competition that forces the WNBA to act, she confirms what critics have been warning about all along. Now let's talk about that 16% stake for a moment. This past weekend, a report surfaced suggesting that the WNBA is exploring the possibility of buying it back. Back in 2022, Commissioner Kathy Engelbert sold 16% of the league to outside investors for $75 million, valuing the league at roughly $1 billion at the time. Since then, the league's valuation has reportedly quadrupled. That means the same 16% stake is now worth far more than the $75 million those investors originally paid. The report suggested the league might attempt to buy back that stake in order to increase the percentage of revenue available to pay players. Many people interpreted this as the league taking concrete action to meet player demands. But here's the problem. Even if the WNBA wanted to buy back that stake, it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Where is that money coming from? The league has historically been subsidized by the NBA and has relied on that support to manage debt. It doesn't have hundreds of millions of dollars sitting in reserve to buy out investors who are currently holding an asset that has exploded in value. And even if the league somehow found the money, why would those investors sell? Their investment has already quadrupled. The league continues to show strong growth indicators. Attendance is rising. Viewership is up. Franchise valuations are climbing. No rational investor walks away from that unless they are offered an enormous premium, one that makes sacrificing future gains worthwhile. So while it sounds good to say the WNBA is exploring a buyback, the practical reality is that it's extremely unlikely to happen anytime soon, and it certainly isn't happening before this CBA needs to be finalized. At this point, Rebecca Lobo's warning about players losing public support is no longer hypothetical. It's already happening, and you can trace exactly when the shift began. During the WNBA Finals, fan sentiment was overwhelmingly on the players' side. The message was clear: these women deserve more money, better travel conditions, improved facilities. The league is growing, and the players should share in that growth. Then the social media campaign began. The hourglass profile pictures, the post calling the league's offers a slap in the face, the petition, the Instagram graphics using misleading financial comparisons, the exclusion of Caitlin Clark from posts celebrating attendance records she largely helped create. Slowly but noticeably, public sentiment started to change. It's not that fans stopped supporting better pay for players. It's that the messaging became increasingly combative, sometimes inaccurate, and occasionally tone-deaf. When you're talking about rejecting offers that include million-dollar max salaries and revenue sharing, you have to be extremely careful with how that rejection is framed. To the average fan watching at home, $1 million salary sounds very reasonable. When that gets labeled as insulting, it risks alienating the very audience you're trying to rally. Comparisons to other professional leagues are inevitable, but they have to be accurate. Yes, NBA players receive roughly 50% of league revenue, but the NBA generated over $10 billion last season. The WNBA's revenue is a fraction of that. Yes, NFL players also get about 50%, but NFL revenues are measured in the tens of billions. These are not comparable business models. More appropriate comparisons would be to leagues at similar stages of development, to other women's professional sports leagues, or to the WNBA's own financial trajectory over the past decade. Those comparisons still support the argument that players deserve more, but they do so in a way grounded in economic reality rather than impossible standards. Negotiating in public is a high-risk strategy. When you take your case to fans and media, you're betting that public pressure will force the other side to move. But that only works as long as the public stays on your side, and public opinion is fickle. Fans will support you when your demands feel reasonable and your messaging is disciplined. But if rhetoric becomes too aggressive, if information doesn't hold up to scrutiny, or if conflicts of interest become impossible to ignore, that support erodes quickly. And once it's gone, it's incredibly difficult to rebuild. Every subsequent statement gets filtered through skepticism. Motives get questioned. The league's position starts to look less unreasonable than it once did. The WNBA Players Association represents some of the best players in the world. Their grievances are real. Their case for better compensation is strong. But that case is being undermined by poor messaging, questionable tactics, and a social media strategy that is beginning to backfire. Rebecca Lobo saw it early. Other media members are seeing it now. And increasingly, fans are seeing it too. So where does this leave us? The deadline has passed. There's no deal. The season is supposed to begin in just a few months, and players are openly talking about alternatives like Unrivaled. If the WNBA season doesn't happen, and if public support continues to erode, the question becomes whether both sides can step back from the public battle and actually negotiate in good faith. Can players recalibrate their messaging and rebuild public trust? Can the league make a genuinely fair offer that addresses core concerns? Can those with conflicts of interest acknowledge that their dual roles are complicating the process? Because one thing should be clear to everyone: a cancelled or delayed WNBA season helps no one. Not the players, not the owners, not the fans, not the sport itself. The league has real momentum right now. Attendance is up. Viewership is rising. Franchise values are increasing. Investment is flowing in. This is the moment to capitalize, not to squander that progress with a work stoppage. The players deserve fair compensation for the value they create. That isn't in dispute. But fair has to be defined by the actual economics of the league, not by comparisons to entirely different business models. And the path to fair compensation runs through disciplined negotiation, not social media battles that risk alienating the fan base you need on your side. Rebecca Lobo's warning was measured. She didn't attack the players. She didn't dismiss their demands. She simply pointed out that their rhetoric was starting to cost them public support. And she was right. The only remaining question is whether anyone listens before that support erodes completely.